What if the moment you feared would end your life became the moment that changed it forever? The Montana wind howled across the wide valley as Charlotte Weston held on to the rattling wagon with every ounce of strength she had left. Her fingers burned, her arms ached, and her heart pounded so hard it felt ready to burst. The year was 1884, and what should have been a simple journey to Willow Bend had turned into a nightmare in the blink of an eye. The horses were terrified, their eyes wide and wild after a broken branch snapped under their hooves. The sound had spooked them, and now they bolted down the rocky trail at full speed. The driver had lost control within seconds. He shouted, pulling desperately at the reins, but the wagon only picked up more speed as it bounced over stones and deep ruts. "Hold on," the driver yelled, but Charlotte already knew she could not hold on much longer. Her bonnet ripped off her head. Her hair whipped around her face. Dust stung her eyes until she could barely see. She felt the wagon tilt dangerously as it hit a deep hole in the path. One more jolt, and she knew her grip would fail. "Help!" she cried, though the wind swallowed her voice. Then the world tipped sideways. Charlotte screamed as her fingers slipped free. Her body flew into open air. For a terrifying second, all she saw was sky and trees spinning wildly. She braced for the hard ground rushing up to meet her, but instead of the crushing blow she expected, she slammed into something strong, warm and alive. Arms. Powerful arms. Arms that wrapped around her and held tight as the two of them tumbled across the ground. The breath was knocked from her lungs as they rolled through dust and grass, his body turning so hers stayed shielded until they finally slid to a stop. Charlotte lay still, stunned, her heart thundering in her ears. "I've got you," a deep voice said, firm and steady. "You're safe now." Charlotte blinked up, her vision clearing just enough to take in the face above hers. A man with sun-browned skin, a strong jaw, and eyes the color of a summer sky stared down at her with concern. His hat had fallen off in the fall, revealing thick, dark blonde hair slightly tousled from the wind. The stranger gently eased back, still keeping an arm around her shoulders. "You all right, ma'am?" Charlotte tried to sit up, but pain shot through her side. She winced. I think so." The man helped her sit carefully. "Name's Colt Maddox," he said. "Saw that wagon flying down the trail. Had to ride fast just to catch up to you." Charlotte glanced toward the trail. Far below, the runaway wagon had crashed against a cluster of boulders, pieces of wood scattered like broken bones. Her breath caught in her throat. "It's gone," she whispered. "Everything I had was in there." Colt looked at her gently. "Nothing worth more than your life." His voice held a calm strength that steadied her trembling hands. Charlotte swallowed hard and brushed dirt from her dress. Her heart still raced from terror. "I'm Charlotte Weston," she said, trying to steady her voice. "Thank you for saving me, Mr. Maddox." "Colt," he corrected with a small smile, "and you don't have to thank me. Anyone would have done the same." But she knew that wasn't true. Most men would have watched helplessly. Charging into the path of a runaway wagon was something only a man with quick instincts and a brave heart would do. Charlotte tried to stand and almost fell back, her legs shaking under her. Colt immediately caught her by the elbow. "Easy," he murmured. "You're hurt." It's just my ankle," she said, embarrassed by how weak she felt. Colt knelt and examined her ankle with careful hands. "Not broken," he said, "but twisted for sure. You won't be walking far today." Charlotte nodded, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. It was too much. Leaving her home in St. Louis, the long journey west, losing her belongings, nearly dying. Colt seemed to sense her struggle. He straightened and offered a gentle look. "You're safe now," he said softly. "I'll get you somewhere warm. There's a ranch about 2 miles west. Belongs to my family." She hesitated. He was a stranger, but he had caught her in mid-air, risking his own life without thinking twice. She felt no fear around him, only the strange comfort of knowing she wasn't alone anymore. "All right," she whispered. Colt helped her to his horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding, and lifted her into the saddle with ease. His hands were warm and steady, and for a moment she noticed how close he was, how strong. He swung up behind her, one arm sliding around her waist to keep her balanced. Charlotte felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You comfortable?" he asked. Yes, she said, though her heart was still racing, now for an entirely different reason. Colt nudged the horse forward, guiding them across the wide meadow. His presence behind her was solid, protective. Charlotte leaned slightly into him without meaning to, her tired body drawn to the safety he offered. "You were headed to Willow Bend?" he asked as they rode. "Yes," she said. I suppose I was going to start over. My aunt lives there." Colt nodded. "It's a good place, but you're not going anywhere tonight. My ma will take care of that ankle. She'll fuss over you like a mother hen." Charlotte smiled faintly. "That sounds nice." The sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky with gold. As they approached a cluster of buildings nestled along a stream, Charlotte felt something unexpected, a small tug in her chest, a sense that perhaps she had been carried not just away from danger, but towards something she hadn't known she was searching for. Colt slowed the horse. "Welcome to the Maddox Ranch," he said quietly. Charlotte looked at the lights, glowing softly from the main house windows. A warm, safe place in the middle of nowhere. And beside her, the man who had caught her from the jaws of death. She didn't know it yet, but nothing about her life would ever be the same again. Charlotte woke to the soft creak of a wooden chair and the scent of warm broth drifting through the quiet room. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The ceiling above her was made of smooth timber beams, and the quilt covering her smelled faintly of lavender. Then everything came back in a rush: the runaway wagon, the fall, and the cowboy who had caught her in his arms. "Easy there," a gentle voice said. Charlotte turned her head to see a woman in her late 50s with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair. She wore an apron and carried herself with a calm assurance that instantly put Charlotte at ease. "I'm Margaret Maddox," the woman said, "Colt's mother." "You've had quite a day, dear." Charlotte tried to sit up, but Margaret hurried over and supported her back with practiced hands. "You're safe now," Margaret said. "Colt brought you in last night. You fainted soon after we got you settled." Heat rose in Charlotte's cheeks. "I'm sorry for the trouble." "Nonsense," Margaret said with a warm smile. "This house has needed a young woman's voice for a long time. The menfolk only make noise." Charlotte couldn't help the small laugh that escaped her. "Thank you for caring for me." Before Margaret could reply, the door opened and Colt stepped in. The morning light framed him, and for a moment Charlotte felt her breath catch. His shoulders filled the doorway, and his blue eyes softened when they met hers. "You're awake," he said, relief clear in his voice. Margaret gave him a teasing look. "He's been pacing the floor since dawn, waiting for you to open your eyes." Charlotte blinked in surprise. "You were worried?" Colt pushed a hand through his hair, looking suddenly shy. "I don't often catch people falling out of the sky. Wanted to make sure you were all right." Her heart stirred with something warm and unfamiliar. Margaret handed Charlotte a bowl of broth. "Eat this. Then we'll check that ankle of yours. Colt, quit hovering and let the girl breathe." Colt raised his hands in surrender and stepped back with a sheepish smile. Charlotte ate the broth slowly, her appetite returning with every sip. When she finished, Margaret unwrapped the bandage around her ankle. The skin was swollen, but the sharp pain from earlier was gone. "You'll be walking in a day or two," Margaret said, rewrapping it gently. "But stay off it today." "I will," Charlotte promised. Margaret patted her hand. "Good. Now I'll let you freshen up. I laid out a dress on the chair there. Belonged to Colt's sister before she married and moved to Oregon. She'd be happy to see it used." When Margaret left the room, Charlotte slowly stood, keeping weight off her injured foot. The dress was a soft green calico, simple and well made. She slipped into it and brushed her hair with the small comb Margaret had provided. When she looked in the mirror, she looked almost like herself again, only more tired, more shaken, and yet somehow steadier too. When she stepped into the hallway, she found Colt waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He looked up the moment she appeared. "You're walking," he said, his smile widening. "That's good." Charlotte carefully descended the stairs, her fingers brushing the railing. Colt stood at the bottom, ready to catch her if she stumbled. She reached the last step without falling, and he let out a breath as if he'd been holding it. "You're safer on stairs than you are in wagons," he said lightly. She smiled. "Thanks to you." Colt shook his head. "You were lucky I was out riding that way." Charlotte held his gaze. "I think it was more than luck." A faint color touched his cheeks, and he cleared his throat. "Come on. Ma made coffee, and Pa wants to meet the woman who caused all his horses to get riled up." Charlotte followed him into the kitchen, where a tall, broad-shouldered man with a snowy white beard sat at the table sipping coffee. He stood the moment she entered. "So you're the young lady my boy risked breaking his neck for," he said with a grin. "Glad to see you in one piece." Charlotte blushed. "It seems I owe your son my life." Pa Maddox looked between her and Colt, then chuckled. "Colt's always had a habit of catching things that fall." "Pa," Colt muttered, embarrassed. Breakfast passed with warm conversation. Colt's father asked about her journey, her home in Missouri, and her plans in Willow Bend. Charlotte told them she had come west to live with her aunt after her family's finances collapsed. "I hoped for a fresh start," she said softly. "But now I have nothing. My belongings were destroyed with the wagon." "You have shelter here," Margaret said firmly, "for as long as you need." Charlotte felt her throat tighten. "You're all very kind." Quote. After breakfast, Colt stepped outside, gesturing for her to follow. She walked carefully onto the porch, resting her hand on the railing. The morning sun lit the fields beyond the ranch, casting gold across the horses grazing there. "I wanted to show you something," Colt said. He pointed to a spot near the barn, where a small leather pouch rested on a stump. "I rode back after dark and found this near where you fell," he said. "Thought it might be yours." Charlotte reached for it with trembling fingers. Inside were her father's letters, the ones she'd carried for comfort since he passed away last year. Tears filled her eyes. "I thought they were gone forever." Colt's voice softened. "I knew they mattered. I could tell." Charlotte clutched the pouch to her chest. For the second time since meeting him, she found herself overwhelmed by the depth of his kindness. "You've done so much for me," she whispered. Colt shook his head. "I just did what was right." Charlotte looked up at him, sunlight catching in his blue eyes. There was something steady in him, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety, warmth, a quiet strength that made her chest tighten. "Colt," she said softly, "why did you risk so much to catch me?" He hesitated, his jaw tightening slightly as he searched for the right words. "Because the moment I saw you fall," he said finally, "I knew I couldn't let you hit the ground." Charlotte's breath caught. Before she could respond, Margaret called from inside, breaking the moment. Colt stepped back, offering her a gentle smile. "We'll talk later. You should rest." But Charlotte knew something had changed, something between them neither could ignore. And as she watched Colt walk across the yard, she felt it deep in her heart. Her life wasn't the only thing he had caught on that trail. The afternoon sun softened into warm gold as Charlotte sat on the porch, her injured ankle propped on a stool. The Maddox Ranch felt strangely peaceful after everything she had survived. Horses grazed behind the fence line. Chickens clucked lazily near the barn. And inside the house, Margaret hummed while preparing supper. But Charlotte's eyes kept drifting toward the pasture, where Colt rode along the fence line on his buckskin horse, checking posts and latches. He moved with steady confidence, the kind only a man raised by the land carried. Watching him made her heart feel both calm and restless at the same time. Her life had changed in a matter of hours. She wasn't sure how to make sense of it. She didn't have long to wonder, because Colt turned his horse and headed toward the house. When he reached the porch, he swung down from the saddle with smooth ease. "You're walking better," he said, noticing how she shifted her weight. "My ankle is much improved," Charlotte replied. "Your mother's care worked wonders." Colt leaned on the porch rail, watching her with eyes that held something deep. Something she wasn't used to seeing from anyone, much less a man she had known for only a day. "Charlotte," he said quietly, "There's something I want to ask you." Her heart skipped, but before he could continue, a horse thundered into the yard. A rider reined in hard, dust spraying around him. It was a ranch hand from Willow Bend, one Charlotte didn't recognize. "Colt!" the rider shouted. "Trouble at the North River crossing, fences down and cattle are scattering." Colt straightened instantly. "How many got loose?" 20, maybe more." Colt pushed off the railing and turned to Charlotte. "I have to go. Won't be back before dark." Charlotte nodded, trying to hide her worry. Before mounting, Colt paused and lowered his voice. "Don't go anywhere near the barn. Bulls are restless today. Stay close to the house." "I will," she promised. "Good," he said softly. "I'll be back." Then he rode off at full speed with the ranch hand behind him. As the sound of hooves faded, a strange emptiness filled the yard. Charlotte limped inside, trying to shake the sudden unease curling in her stomach. Margaret noticed immediately. "He'll be fine, dear. Colt's been handling cattle since he could walk." Quote. Charlotte forced a smile, but her thoughts stayed out there with him, somewhere along the riverbank where the land grew rough and men often got hurt. Night settled faster than expected. Shadows stretched long across the fields. Lamps glowed inside the house. But Charlotte found herself too restless to sit still. "I think I'll get some air," she told Margaret. Margaret nodded knowingly. "You're worried." Charlotte stepped onto the porch. The night was cool, the air filled with the distant calls of owls and crickets. She held the railing and scanned the dark horizon. Minutes passed. Then an hour. No sign of Colt. The worry that had been whispering inside her grew louder. Just when she began to fear the worst, she heard something faint hooves approaching at a slow, uneven pace. Her heart lurched. A single horse emerged from the darkness. Colt. But he wasn't sitting upright. He was slumped slightly, one hand gripping the saddle horn, his shirt torn at the shoulder. Charlotte hurried down the steps as fast as her ankle allowed. "Colt!" He stopped before the porch, breath heavy. "I'm all right," he said quickly, though his voice was tight with pain. "Just took a bad hit from a steer." Charlotte reached for him, her hands trembling as she steadied him. "You're hurt." "Nothing serious," he said, but the way he winced told another story. Margaret rushed out behind her. "Get him inside." Between the two women, they helped Colt into the living room chair. Margaret fetched water and bandages. Charlotte knelt at his side, gently brushing dirt from the scrape on his arm. "You scared me," she whispered. Colt's eyes softened. "Didn't mean to." "You could have been." She stopped herself, unable to say the word. Colt reached for her hand. "I promised I'd come back." She squeezed his fingers. "You kept your promise." Margaret finished tending his wound and gave them space. When she disappeared into the kitchen, the room grew quiet, filled only with the soft crackle of the lantern flame. Colt looked at Charlotte, really looked, the way he had earlier before he was interrupted. "I didn't get to finish what I was trying to say," he said. Her breath caught. "What was it?" Quote. Colt took her hand again, his grip warm and steady. "I don't know why fate threw you from that wagon, but I do know I'm glad I was there, glad I caught you, glad you're here now." Charlotte's chest tightened. "Colt, you came to Montana because you needed a new start," he said softly. "And I guess what I want to know is, could that new start be here? With us? With me?" The words hit her like a warm breeze, gentle, surprising, and full of hope. "I barely know you," Charlotte whispered, "and yet it feels like my heart recognized you the moment you caught me." Colt smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes. "Same for me." She took a breath that felt like the first true breath since her journey began. "Colt Maddox," she said, her voice trembling, "but sure, I think my new start is exactly here." Colt's hand shifted, cupping her cheek. "Then I'll spend every day proving you made the right choice." Charlotte leaned toward him, her heart pounding. Their foreheads touched. His voice dropped to a quiet promise. "You're safe now, and you're not alone anymore." Quote. Charlotte closed her eyes, letting the warmth of him steady her. She had been tossed from danger straight into the arms of the one man who felt like home. And this time, she wasn't falling. She was choosing.